If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you're enjoying these stories, there's a link below to buy me a cup of coffee. This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com. HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. Shalom Aleichem, my sweetest friends. Another week, another pair of Chassidic stories, Bezat Hashem. But before we begin, I want to dedicate this episode to the continued success of our soldiers in battle wherever they are, the returning of all the hostages whole, healthy, and complete, and alive, Bezat Hashem, the refuah shlema, the full recovery of everybody who's been injured or who is ill, the comforting of those that lost loved ones, and the continued unity of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and all around the world, Bezat Hashem. The first story I have for you is with the Shpoler Zaidi. The Shpoler Zaidi, who got his name, the grandfather of Shpola, from, of course, the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. He was also a Chassid of the Maggid Mezrich, and he lived from 1725 to 1811. In the town of Shpola, which is in Ukraine, there was a simple merchant whose name was Zundel, and Zundel made his living by going around and buying wholesale buttons, needles, and thread, any little small things that didn't cost him too much and that he could resell at a profit. And he would stand in the marketplace selling his little trinkets, buttons, needles. Who needs some thread? You, sir, do you need some thread? And this is how he made his living. And one day, there's a large company of several hundred soldiers of the Tsar's army that came marching into town. And as soon as they arrived, they spread out in the marketplace. And everybody's looking around, buying some food, buying this thing and the other. And there's a few soldiers standing in front of Zundel's stand, looking at some of the needles and the buttons. And all of a sudden, before he even realized it, one of the soldiers reached behind the counter and took the cash box and simply walked away. When Zundel realized what had happened, it was already too late. And all of the soldiers were clean-shaven and in uniforms, and they were goyim into a chassid like Zundel. They all looked exactly the same, and he started panicking. He didn't know what to do. Of course, he'd heard of things like this happening to other people, but he never imagined that it would actually happen to him. And here it did. And the vendor next to him, he sees Zundel starting to sweat and breathe heavily and pace around and be very stressed. And he says, Zundel, what's going on? And he tells his friend in the stall next to him that someone stole all of his money. And it was all the money that he had in his entire life. And he says to the other vendor, what am I supposed to do? The other vendor said, listen, you have two choices. Either daven to Hashem or go to the commander of these soldiers and complain and then daven to Hashem. So Zundel, realizing that he didn't have any choice, he needed to get his money back. He started looking for the commander of the soldiers. He told his wife to stay behind the stall, and he started asking the soldiers, who's your commander? And they pointed him into his general direction, but they didn't know exactly where he was. Some had seen him in one place or another, and along the way, some of the soldiers were looking Zundel up and down, and they said, you're looking for our general? Boy, you don't know how much he hates Jews. And now Zundel got really nervous, because he knew he didn't have any choice. He had to go get his money back. But now he had to deal with an anti-Semite as well. And so as he's asking around, where's the general? All of a sudden, this booming voice comes behind him and says, hey, Jew, you're looking for me? And he sees the general coming out of a restaurant. Apparently word had gotten around that some Jew was looking for the general. So he looks Zundel up and down, disgusted that he actually has to speak with a Jew. And he says, talk, Jew. What do you want? And now Zundel was shaking from fear, and he couldn't even speak. And the general said, listen, Jew, I don't have time to waste. Either speak or get out of my face. And so Zundel said, Your Honor, one of your soldiers stole my money, and I want it back. And the general says, what are you talking about? My men stole your money? He said, yeah, I have a stall here in the market, and I sell little trinkets, and I'm not a wealthy person. I don't have a lot of money. And everything that I had in the cash box was everything that I have for paying for food, wood, resupplying, feeding my children. Please, sir, it's everything I have in life. I need my money back. And so the general says, I don't believe that one of my men, one of my disciplined, fine soldiers would steal money from a measly Jew like you. I mean, what do you have in your cash box? A few filthy coins touched by your filthy hands? My men are disciplined soldiers. They don't steal. But listen, if you really believe that one of my men did it, you tell me which one, and I'll get you your money back. And then he says, hey, Jew, show me your ID papers. And so he takes out his papers, and the general has his assistant write them down. And he says, okay, I'm going to give you one shot to point out who you think the thief is. And if he really stole your money, then I'll have him return it to you. But if not, I'll have you whipped until you faint or die. And then he took out a fancy cigar, bit off the end, spit it on the ground, and lit the cigar as he said to Zundel, you have until tomorrow morning to point out the so-called thief to me. Now Zundel didn't know what to do, because all of the soldiers looked exactly the same. And he could tell the difference between Jews, but Goyim to him also all looked the same. Blonde hair, blue eyes, clean-shaven. Everyone's in an army uniform. And now he didn't have a choice. He either points out the thief, or he's going to be beaten to death, chas v'shalom, God forbid. What would be with his wife and children? He knew he had no choice. He had to go to his Rebbe, the Shpoler Zaydi. And so he quickly went to the great tzadik and told him what had happened, the money being stolen, the general, the threats, and how would he know who the thief is? Rebbe, please, you have to help me. And the Shpoler Zaydi said, Zundel, you have nothing to be worried about. When all of the men are lined up for roll call in the morning, I want you to go there and look each soldier directly in the eyes. The one that looks at you with hatred in his eyes, grits his teeth, and tightens his fists. I promise you, Zundel, that's the thief. And so Zundel thanked the Rebbe, and he went home, and he opened a book of Tehillim and davened for many hours before he went to sleep. And the next morning, he was still scared, but he knew that the Rebbe had told him how to find the thief. And when all the soldiers were lined up for roll call, Zundel shows up, the general sees him, and he says, okay, you have one shot. Go along the line and tell me who the thief was. And so Zundel starts going, one soldier after another, looking them in the eyes. One of them started gritting his teeth, looked at Zundel with hate, and tightened his fists. And Zundel shouts out, General, come here. The general and his assistant come over, and he says, this is the thief. He stole my money. Zundel's pointing at the soldier, and the general says to the soldier point blank, give me back the money. Now the general was certain that Zundel was lying, or that the soldier would just deny everything, and then the general could have Zundel beaten, and they were done. But instead the soldier said, but general, why would I return money to a filthy Jew? Who cares about a Jew? He's like a mosquito or a cockroach. It's just like we kill them. Why don't we have a problem killing Jews? Would you return money to a mosquito? But the general was very angry, because this was his honor. These were his soldiers, and he had said they would never steal money. They were disciplined. And so the general had the soldier flogged. He had him whipped with no mercy. And of course, he had the money returned to Zundel. But now, being an anti-Semite, and feeling that his own honor was disrespected by Zundel, calling out one of his soldiers as a thief, the general wanted revenge. And he says to Zundel, how did you recognize the thief? For a Jew like you, everybody here looks the same. How could you possibly have known? And poor Zundel was so confused and scared. Here's the general screaming in his face. In the background, he hears the soldier being beaten by a whip. And what he should have said is, I don't know, I guess I was lucky. But instead he told the truth. And he said to the general, I'm a chassid of a great tzadik, the Shpoler Zaydi. He can see from one end of the world to the other. And he told me how to spot the thief. Ah, the general said, a holy Jew, huh? Well, let's bring him over here and give him a little beating. And then we'll see how holy he actually is. Go to your rabbi and tell him if he doesn't come here by tonight, I'll kill you and him as well. And now Zundel thought, what a shlemazel I am. What bad luck I have. I should have just said I was lucky. I had to tell him the truth. Now I'm threatening the Rebbe's life and my life. And I got the money back. Why does life have to be so hard? But he had no choice. He ran to the Rebbe as quickly as he could, and once again told the Rebbe what happened. And the Rebbe, just like before, was very calm. He said, Zundel, there's nothing to worry about. I want you to go back right now to the general. You're not going to wait till tonight. Go right now. And first, you're going to tell him that the Rebbe refuses to come to him. And second, you're going to tell him that if he wants to know what's going on, he should check his own pockets. So Zundel left the Rebbe's house. Poor guy, shaking and trembling. He didn't know what to do. On the one hand, he was scared the general was going to kill him. On the other hand, the Rebbe was filled with such confidence and so calm. Of course, he decided to trust in the Rebbe. And he goes back to the general, and the general says, "Oh, you're back so quick. Where's your rabbi?" And Zundel was going to give the message that the Rebbe gave him, but the general got so upset, his face turned red with anger, and he started shaking with fury. Now all the soldiers started gathering around because they saw what was going on. And Zundel said, "My Rebbe is not coming." And the general took his gun out of his holster and pointed it at Zundel. And then Zundel, who was shaking from fear, he said, and the Rebbe said, "If you want to know what's going on, check your pockets." And the general started going crazy. He said, "Check my pockets. Who is your rabbi? I'll show you what's in my pocket. I'm going to shoot you and shoot your rabbi." And he was about to shoot Zundel, chas v'shalom, but for some reason, still holding the gun in his right hand, he sticks his left hand in his pocket and pulls out an envelope that was there. He looks at it and he turns white. He looks at it again, and then he drops his gun and starts running. Now the soldiers were encamped next to a huge cliff, and down below was a tiny river in a valley. And this general ran and jumped off the cliff. Oh! And all the soldiers are looking at one another in shock. What just happened? There was total chaos, and Zundel ran out of there as fast as he could. And not understanding what was going on, he went back once again to the Spoiler Zaidi and told him what happened. He said, "Rebbe, I'm really sorry, I'm going out of my mind. I don't understand what's going on here." And the Rebbe said, "Zundel, calm down. I told you there's nothing to worry about." The general was a very evil man. He'd killed a lot of innocent people, and he was planning to do worse. He and a group of revolutionaries were going to murder the Tsar, take over the throne, and who knows what he would have done if he was in power. But he fell into his own trap, because that morning he had 2 letters in his pocket. One that he was giving to the Tsar, pretending to be his loyal and faithful general who would do anything the Tsar asked of him. The second was to his fellow conspirators, with all the details of what he was planning on doing personally to murder the Tsar and take over the throne. And when he saw that the letter to the Tsar, saying that he was his loyal servant, was still in his pocket, and that he had sent the wrong letter to the Tsar, knowing what was awaiting him, he chose to throw himself off the cliff rather than face the consequences. And so the faith of simple, innocent Zundel got his money back, got rid of an evil man, and protected the Rebbe as well. And sometimes we face enormous challenges. We don't know how to overcome them. And what we can learn from this simple chassid was turning to Hashem, having faith in the tzadikim, and not fearing, knowing that with faith in Hashem, even the greatest challenges can be overcome. Hi, I have one more short story for you. As you know, of course, there's a war going on here in Israel, and one of the phenomenon that you see is soldiers and young men wearing tzitziot. There have probably been tens of thousands of pairs of tzitziot donated, and I see it in the shuk in Machane Yehuda here in Jerusalem. You'll see guys working in the stalls, covered in tattoos, no kippah, but they're all wearing tzitziot. So these tzitziot came from around the Jewish world, here in Israel, and also from the United States. And there's a story told by a rabbi life who participated in one of these tzitziot missions to raise money and to prepare tens of thousands of tzitziot for soldiers who didn't have their own. And here's a story that he heard about the tzitziot. There was a small unit of soldiers in one of the elite units of the IDF that was given a very special mission that would take them undercover into Gaza. They were looking for a group of terrorists. And in order to be successful in their mission, they had to dress as Hamas terrorists. And they were given Hamas uniforms. They wore the bandana. They all had beards. They had makeup to make them look as Arab as possible. But the whole unit had received tzitziot from one of these campaigns. And they all decided to wear their tzitziot underneath their Hamas uniforms for protection. And the mission began. They entered the building they needed to go in Gaza and started searching for the terrorists. Each of them knew that any moment they could be discovered and killed, God forbid. And at some point, they were discovered. The terrorists hiding in different buildings started shooting at them, and they knew that they had to be extracted. They weren't going to get out of this mission alive. Not knowing what to do, they started returning fire and eventually made their way to the roof of the building, hoping to get a little more space and see where the attackers were, or at least draw them out into the open where they could attack them back. And when they reached the roof of the building and they're looking around to see how they can defend themselves, they were shocked and relieved to see an Israeli helicopter coming to save them. At least that's what they thought. But their joy turned into panic when they realized that the helicopter was not positioning itself for a rescue mission, it was getting ready to fire on them. And they realized because they looked like Hamas terrorists from head to toe. That was the whole point. And they suddenly realized that instead of being rescued, they were the targets. The helicopter was quickly coming closer, and it was about to open fire. And there was no way to make radio contact with the pilot. And there was no place to hide on the roof of the building. And then all of a sudden, the leader of the unit, he shouts to his soldiers, "Everyone pull out your tzitziot." And they realized what he was saying. Frantically, everybody went and pulled their tzitziot out from under their uniforms and started waving them in the air. And they could see the helicopter pilot, who literally had his finger on the trigger. They could see his eyes open wide. He wasn't sure what to make of this. But one thing he knew is that Hamas terrorists don't wear tzitziot, and he realized this must be an undercover unit. Instead of shooting at them, he called in backup. They sent other helicopters and saved the soldiers. And when they finally met the pilot, that Baruch Hashem didn't kill them, they asked him, "What were you thinking?" And he said, "From my perspective, it was clear that you were a bunch of terrorists, and it was my mission to take you out. When I saw everyone waving the tzitziot, Yarad HaSimon, the penny dropped, and I realized that you were an undercover unit." Both the pilot and the soldiers understood that it was because of fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitziot that their lives were literally saved, which was, of course, the intention when they put them on before their mission. And when the people who donated the money and donated the tzitziot had in mind, they wanted to protect the soldiers, of course, in battle. But they never imagined that literally the tzitziot would have saved their lives. I have one more really short story for you. There was a painful sore on the back of Reb Mordechai Dov of Hornesteipel. And the doctors decided there was no other way to treat it except to remove it. And the tzadik, the Hornesteipel, he agreed to have it removed. In the medical techniques in those days, they used 3 metal rods that were heated up, and they were preparing to apply them. And what they would do is they would try to burn the sore with a metal rod that was heated up somewhat hot. And if they saw that the patient didn't react to the first one, then they applied a hotter one. And if they saw that the patient didn't feel that one, they had an even hotter one. And having accustomed himself to accepting all suffering and silence, when they applied the first hot rod to the back of the tzadik, he didn't move at all. He didn't even give any indication that he knew that they were performing a surgery. And so the doctor went to the second one, which was hotter. And once again, the tzadik didn't move. And so the doctor went to the third one. And the tzaddik was accepting this pain with love and not complaining about anything. He didn't even move. The doctor was shocked, and he said out loud, "I don't know whether this rabbi is an angel or a demon." Now Reb Mordechai Dov, he barely understood Russian, and so he asked somebody who was standing there, "What did the doctor say?" And when he was told in Yiddish what the doctor said, he answered, Please tell the doctor that if a fellow Jew comes and presents me with a kvittel, meaning a note that's given to the Rebbes, where he tells me of all the problems that he's having and asks me for advice and to daven for him, and I see in heaven that I can't help my fellow Jew, he said, tell the doctor, that hurts me much more than any of the hot rods that he applied to my back, and in that suffering, I have to keep silent as well. Thank you so much for listening, my sweetest friends. Thank you to all the supporters of this podcast, everyone who sends in a monthly contribution, a yearly one, a one-time cup of coffee. They're all appreciated. Also, all the comments that people leave. I read them all and respond to them all. So thank you for interacting with the stories. I hope you have a beautiful Shabbos, my friends, and a beautiful Rosh Chodesh. And next week, we'll be back with more stories. Most likely, Abdullah Lubavitcher Rebbe, since it will be near Gimel Tammuz. So until then, my sweetest friends, take care of yourselves. Sei gesund. Buttons, needles. Who needs some thread? You, sir, do you need some thread?